I believe now that from the beginning I was destined to be different.
Shanti Bhavan is a school for the poorest of the poor. We take children at the age of 4 and they are with us for the rest of their young adult days.
The mission of Shanti Bhavan is to get these children out of poverty. It is to break the fate that their parents have been trapped in.
We are here to bring up your children, to love them and encourage them.
Only one child is taken per family. I have to use that opportunity in order to change the life that I left behind.
My mom sent me to Shanti Bhavan because she was the only person who loved me.
When I was small, we lived in a thatched roofed house. Everything is in this room.
In addition to uplifting my family, I have the responsibility of giving back to society. I've got a lot to lose. It's now or never for me.
Suddenly one day I woke up and I said, my God, the money is gone.
There was only two options: lie down and die, or just go forward. Closing the school would mean sending all the children back to where they came from. I knew I couldn't live with it. My father too.
I am the answer for my mother's pain. I am who I am because of her. I will show the world I am that girl who makes doorways of freedom, hope and relief. Not only for my mother, but for all those out there who are in need.
Thank you so much, everybody. Vanessa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Congratulations. For those of you who don't know, this documentary, this series is 7 years in the making. What you are looking at is 7 years of work, which is unbelievable. Yeah. How did this start for you? How did you first hear about the Shanti Bhavan school?
So I was introduced to Shanti Bhavan, like 7 years ago. No, it's fine.
We literally were just talking about how to pronounce it correctly backstage.
Yeah, I think it translates to abode of peace. So, like the peace home. So I was told about it by a friend of mine who was going to be a volunteer there. The school is in southern India, and then they take a lot of volunteers from around the world. So a friend of mine, Jenny Douglas, was going to be going as a volunteer, and she told me about the school. And I had been making lots of films about very vulnerable children and families for a long time, and I thought, I really want to do something that's beautiful and long-term and watch kids develop and have some optimism and hope about possibility. And so when I met the kids and I met Dr. George and saw the school, I just thought it was like just a perfect idea for something that would be like over time.
That said, as much as it is a series about hope and possibility and change, you aren't afraid to sort of dive into the pressures that these children face, which can be overwhelming for some of them.
Yeah, so that's also, so I was really interested. I thought the school was a fantastic place to watch child development, really, and understand the challenges. So these kids are kids who come from the lowest socioeconomic group in India. They're from what's considered the Dalit group of people that their families and their communities have never gone to school, most of them.
They work for under $2. They make under $2
$2 a day, yeah, which is a requirement for them to get into the school. And they come to the school when they're at age 4, and it's a residential school, but they still have connection to their family. So I was really interested in what that's like for these kids to live in two worlds, and the expectations and the challenges they have to meet sort of what's expected of them from the school and in education, and then going out into the world. Versus what their families are expecting of them. And these kids are kids who, so at age 4, they only accept one child per family. So these kids from the very beginning know that as they grow up, they are going to have the responsibility to really lift both themselves, their families, and their communities out of poverty. So I was really interested in what that took.
And that said, though, when you hear them talk about going home, or going back home from the school, they aren't really allowed to showcase everything that they've learned. It's a different experience, right? Like you said, these two different worlds. The world back home is one that is almost resentful to a degree of what these kids have learned and know about, specifically regarding the sort of liberalism of the Western ways that they're figuring out there.
I don't know. Yeah, I think my experience with the families had been that they were so actually proud of their kids, and these kids are really the...
Resentful might not be the right word.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the siblings, there are issues like with siblings that come up over time about, and I don't know if it's resentment or jealousy or just a difference in their experiences that that creates this valley between them in relationships, and how to communicate. And, on both sides, I think that becomes a challenge for the kids growing up because they lose a little bit of their language, of their siblings, and the siblings don't know English, and these kids learn English. But the families themselves, like these kids are the ones that they're, really proud of and excited for. And the communities now, like the kids that have grown up, the communities are so proud, of these girls and what they've done. But yeah, I was also just really interested in following the relationships that these kids had with their families and their moms in particular.
What made you focus on girls?
Yeah, so when we first started, it wasn't intended to be about girls. I really wanted to do something that was about all the kids because the challenges that they all have are important and interesting, and the goals they all have are fabulous, and the families, again, are so diverse right from each other. But as we, 7 years is a long time of getting footage, and as we watch them grow and watch them develop, when I worked with my editors, the editors really were pushing me, saying, we have a lot of stories, we're going to have to really hone it down. And then we looked at kind of how we would separate that. We realized that the best footage and the strongest footage and the most complete footage I had was of the girls. And I don't know if that was subconscious or if it just was what it was. They just kind of, I had gotten more of them over time. And then also we realized that in each family, the mother really was the rock of the family and the one really needing to hold everything together. And so I became more and more interested in that relationship between the daughter and the mother, and the new generation being the first in their generation and a new kind of woman in the world. And I think, they're all going through all kinds of struggles and challenges of being the first, but I think for the girls, they're dealing with caste, class, and gender. Yeah. So I think that those three things, just even for story structure, makes it, there's more that they need to overcome.
So now you're shooting this for 7 years. I have to say the girls that you've chosen are remarkably confident and beautiful and charismatic. Is that something that you found in the edit room, where you were like, oh, these are the best that we've shot, let's hone in on these girls? Or when you got into the school, were you like, that girl is amazing, we have to shoot her?
This sounds probably corny to say, but if you go to Shanti Bhavan, every kid is pretty amazing. Like, it actually wasn't like a difficult thing to find great kids there. Right. And I wasn't looking for like, oh, this kid is beautiful or something. I was looking for kids who would be, and their families too, would be open. I don't mean beautiful,
like physically,
I know.
Yeah.
No, I just mean, like spiritual, all of it. Yeah, no, I just mean like they are also, I feel like they are also like, they're just confident and great on camera, and they were so open to us being there. But these particular girls that ended up in this, there are a couple things. One main thing, doing documentaries is really about, we need to have the trust of the kids and their families and access. And I think, these families in the school, they were also, and the villages, they were also open to us being there.
Did you ever have any difficulty?
Not really. Again, I think that the school really paved our way to everybody trusting us, that we had the best interest of, them in mind, and that it wasn't going to be something that was exploitive in any way, that it was really looking at them. And the thing that was also most important to me was making sure we had kids that were comfortable voicing their own perspective of the world, and this wasn't, being made to be an advertising sort of propaganda kind of piece for the school. It was about these girls and about them growing up, and Dr. George and Ajit being very open to us telling the girl story, as well as, in the series you see the ups and downs of running the school as well.
It's definitely, the series is not a propaganda piece for the school at all, but that said, the school is really wonderful, and it's hard not to depict it as just wonderful. Mm-hmm. How did you balance that?
I think, just like I was saying, I think that what we stayed true to is, every time when we would be filming and then also editing, always looking for just really what's the authentic voice and the authentic experience of the girls themselves or of Dr. George. We paid a lot of attention to making sure that anytime someone speaks, they're speaking about themselves, and they're not sort of speaking for someone else. And I think that was important so that you get really to understand their own personal experience.
How did you get Dr. George and the school on board? And actually, could you, I mean, for the audience here, I think we might have skipped ahead a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about who Dr. George is and how he started the school?
Yeah. Okay. So Abraham George is the founder of the school. He was a businessman. He actually went to NYU, Stern School of Business. He's from India, but he was a businessman here, and he made money, I think, in the tech boom. He had sold his company he had, and he had always wanted to do something and some kind of humanitarian thing back. Actually, I don't think he needed it to be India, but he found that the most need was there. So he decided he really put all of his money into the school. So the school was self-financed by him for years. And then if you see the series, there's some ups and downs with how that works out for him. But he had a real vision for wanting to lift these kids out of poverty. And so it was an idea of a poverty alleviation program. But really, his idea was not just education, but the whole foundation of the school is that the kids, I said this before, but that they are not only lifted out of poverty themselves by being educated, but that they bring their family and the community, and it multiplies, and that effect ripples out. And I think what's fascinating to me now is the school's been in existence, 20-something years, but it's only, that's the thing with education, it's only now that the kids who started there when the school started are in their early 20s. So it's still sort of we're yet to see
it's a real
what
long-term
happens.
commitment.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's so special about the school too, is that's really different about a lot of education programs, is that they're committed to the kids through college. It's not just like, get to 10th grade, get to 12th grade, and then good luck. But they make sure that they stay in college, and they're working really hard right now on making sure they put resources in place for the kids when they start work, and then also the kids themselves being mentors to each other. So I've been really moved by watching that and how the kids all really take care of each other too.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
What are the numbers in India in terms of the poor, right? I mean, the population of India is like, 1.4 billion or something, and the number of people actually living in poverty in India dwarfs the actual population of the United States or something like that, right?
Yeah, I don't want to be horrible with numbers if I'm wrong about it, but there are hundreds of millions of people who are considered Dalit in the world. So it's not like a small...
In the world or in India?
Yeah, in the world, most of those are India.
Oh, wow.
And that's not saying poverty, that's this group. So if you include living in, less than $1 a day, I'm sure everybody who can Google things very fast can do that faster than I can to see the numbers.
Go for it.
But it's not like this. It's not like this series is about some, niche of a little small group of people. These kids represent, an extraordinarily large group of the population in the world.
Of the world population, yes. Yeah. And it's incredible because when you think about those numbers, it can be kind of overwhelming. But what Dr. George did was say, okay, let's not be overwhelmed by those numbers. Let's act sort of locally almost and work small and see if that can, in 20, 30 years, actually affect a much larger change.
Yeah.
Is he as inspiring to be around as I think he is?
Yeah, I think he's a real visionary. I think that he's a complicated man. I think the idea, of dropping everything, leaving everything behind and starting a school, you have to have a certain kind of confidence, vision, you have to be
unwavering,
a certain personality to do that. So I think, obviously like anyone who runs a big organization, there's a complicated life. The same thing with the kids as well. They have complicated family lives, and it's not so straightforward the whole time for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Why 7 years? Like, why did it end up? Why did you end up going for 7 years?
So originally, I actually thought of 10 years, and I had thought of that.
This was going to be your your up series.
Well, this was like I had done so many films where I had this very kind of this pressure over like the course of a year to get something done, and I was sort of on call to people all the time, and I did like verite kinds of films and films about kids.
You won an Oscar.
Yeah. And that one was actually sort of short term, and the woman I made that with, Cynthia Wade, was really, I feel like, the real push on that one. But my films usually, I'm following people over time and talking to them all the time, and it's very intense. And this one, I was sort of looking at it as like my sort of this leisurely thing that I could take my time and watch and let it develop itself and let the kids' lives tell the direction of it. And the reason for 7 years is 2 years ago is when we brought it to Netflix. And when we brought it to Netflix, I wasn't sure exactly, what shape, if it should be a feature, if it should be a series. And we realized we had so much material that it would be great as a series. So the 7 years ends up being a little arbitrary because it's just when it made sense that we had been filming for a long time. I felt that it was a good stopping point for this season of this show, that the oldest kids are now getting their first jobs. So, we follow the oldest kids up until, they're in their early 20s, and then the youngest girl, Temily, when she's 7 when we start. And so by the time, episode 4 is done, she's almost 14. And so it just felt like a good place to end these episodes.
This is maybe a silly question. How do you handle the personal relationships that you make as a documentary filmmaker? I've worked with documentary filmmakers before, and I see them get calls from their subjects all the time, and I'm always kind of like, I couldn't do that. How do you handle it, especially when it's kids?
Yeah. Well, that's to me, making a documentary is everyone, over time especially, is that these people become part of your lives, and so I only will do something that I'm really in love with the idea of being invested that way. And I think that, with these girls, that wasn't a difficult thing to have a relationship, and I really just respected their families and mothers. And again, Dr. George and Ajit and the staff at Shanti Bhavan were always so welcoming to us, and I think really had this faith that they could trust me. So I think, to me, it's also about like earning and keeping everybody's trust.
That said, was it hard to let it go when you were like, okay, we're done, we're going to edit, we're going to release this? Yeah. Was it hard to sort of let the process of shooting and being with them go?
Well, since we didn't live in India, I would see them like once a year or something, and we'd talk, so it wasn't like that intensive. But no, actually, I've loved, now that we're done shooting and now that we're done editing, I actually love it more because there's not this sort of veil of some agenda that I have. Yeah, like I just went back with my family this summer to show the series to everybody, and it was so nice to just be able to walk around the campus and see the girls. And I visited Karthika, who lives in Delhi now, who's one of the oldest girls, and we just got to relax and talk, and they didn't feel like they had to say anything in particular. I didn't feel like I had to ask anything.
You're not yelling at a DP or trying to get questions.
Yeah, it was so nice. But I think, like I said to you in the back, now that it's out and, it's on Netflix and it's around the world and we're getting really nice, beautiful feedback, and I'm so proud of the girls to have their stories, shared in the world. But I'm feeling a little postpartum about it. Like I'm feeling like, it's after all this time, there is this this strange feeling of like letting go, for sure.
Because even when you finish a film, you as the filmmaker don't really finish. It's just like it's finished because the time came to finish it. And you're like, I could keep going on this, I bet. Especially when you have all the footage that you have.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you could have kept going?
Yeah, and we could, because again, like their lives keep going. We could. But it's also a lot, and it's also a lot on the girls too, to know that their lives are being documented. I mean, I can't imagine saying yes to somebody who would want to follow life. If you imagine like a camera just keeping, going with you.
It's interesting that you can't imagine saying yes to that when you're the one who does it.
I can barely imagine saying yes to an interview. So yeah, yeah.
How important is it for you as a filmmaker right now to put something positive out in the world like this? This is about possibility and hope and change and investment in the future. Real long-term investment, which is not something I think specifically in this country we talk about that well anymore. How does it feel to put a documentary like this out?
Yeah, I feel like the timing of this right now has been really great. And it wasn't obviously the intention of the timing, but I feel like what I've noticed with feedback, at least, has been that people are really looking at both what Dr. George decided to do with his life and then the opportunities the kids have and the inner resources those kids have as nice models and nice ways to reflect on your own life and your own choices that you make. And I feel like the way that the world is at this moment, I feel like I think a lot about, we all have our opinions about things, and we all, there's a lot of ways to express how we feel about stuff, but I think what's so important is what are you going to do about it, and having an action. And I think that this series, again, is like a good model for that, of the people at the school, the volunteers that go to the school, the kids, their families, and they're all acting on, they're acting on their hopes and their dreams and their goals, and they're working hard every day. And to me, that's what's been great. The kind of feedback I've been getting that really feels good to get is that it's a series that's making people reflect a little bit. And again, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get some questions from the audience. Who's right here? Hi.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi.
I was wondering what everyone who was in the film thought about how they were portrayed.
That's a very good question. And that was the thing I was most nervous about, and I'm always the most nervous about when I'm making a film, because I really, in my deepest, the deepest heart, want everyone to feel good about how I represent them, because they open up their lives to us. And I was very happy to know that they were all very happy about it. If you see the series and you see Tamil, who starts at age 7, grow up, there are some very embarrassing moments for her. Like when she's starting to go through puberty, there's a scene of her in this class about puberty. So when we watched it with her, she was like covering her whole self, not to see it. But then she got so much support from all the other kids that I think she started feeling good about it. And I think now when I talked to her, she said she's feeling good. And I think the other kids felt good. I appreciated when I saw it with Karthika. She said that she had been the most proud of it because she felt like we represented really her own, again, her own voice, and that we let her speak for herself. And I think she felt good about that. I'm sure they all have, especially, and Dr. George and Naj, I'm sure they all have their criticisms or the things that they feel uncomfortable with, but at least to me, they've said they're very happy. And I hope that even though it's about these specific girls, that it also translates to being about, all the kids there, and, any kid really who's first generation of something new in the history of their families, I think is another thing I hope they feel good about.
It's so interesting. It makes sense that they would respond that way to it, because one of the goals of the school that they say is not just teaching, math and science, but teaching substance and how to be a good person in your community, and a moral person, and a critical thinker emotionally. And they are that. It's incredible, these kids, they're confident. So it makes sense that they would respond so self-assuredly to the film,
Yeah, and they're also, they're used to growing up around each other, in this residential school. So they're used to kind of knowing everything about each other. So I think in that way, too, it was a safe place to be vulnerable for them, because they knew they had this, family of people around them supporting them.
Next question. Over here.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm so excited to watch this.
Oh, good.
I was wondering, what was your day-to-day filming routine like? Mm-hmm. Did you go to school in the morning and follow one girl, or did you change based on the day?
It wowould change based on when we were there. So again, we didn't live there, so we would go for 3 weeks to a month or something. And again, a lot of films that I do, if I'm nearby, I'm more on call, and if something's going on, if it's a verite kind of film where we're following over time, I just jump up and go shoot. This wasn't like that. This was more, we knew we were there for, let's say, a few weeks. We had to get certain things done. So it would depend, if someone was going home, then we would be going, we would make a plan to go home with them. And again, we had filmed with more than just the girls that are in it. So it would just depend. And it would also sometimes depend if there was something going on at the school that felt important to capture, we would do that. The places the kids live and the school are kind of far from each other, so a lot of it also had to do just with geography of when we, would arrive, kind of what would be important at that time. Yeah.
So you shot with a lot more kids than, or you had more characters that didn't end up making the final cut. When you screened the film for the school, were there kids who expected to have a bigger role in the movie, or were any of the girls surprised that they had such a big role in it?
No, I mean,
we
talked. Yeah, we talked. It was always very open communication about what we were doing and what we were thinking. And the kids that we spent the most time with knew that they were the ones that we were spending the most time with. Do you know what I mean? Like, it kind of narrowed down as we went. There were a couple of the boys that we had spent more time with, and I felt badly that they didn't, end up in it, because we went home with them, we went to work with them, we went to their families. But I'm hoping we can still do something with that, because I think also in talks of gender and gender equity, I don't think the conversation can go very far unless you include boys in that conversation. And
there's an expectation of boys and men and masculinity that I'm sure has to be a part of the conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think that's really important. So I'm hoping, we're building a lot of outreach and impact kind of materials now around it. So I'm hoping we can include some of the boy footage as well. And and that had been one of my hesitancies about making it just girls, because I really do feel strongly that any of gender equity discussion or social action has to be with both.
Season 2.
Yeah, right. There you
go. One more question.
Hello. I actually was really curious about one of the girls in particular. She was the one who wanted to be a lawyer. And
a lawyer?
Yeah, the last part of the series, she had a case pending with the land in her hometown.
Yeah.
So I was actually wondering what happened with that.
So she's talking about Karthika, who we meet in episode 1, but sort of through the series we get to know her more. And by episode 4, she's in law school, and she actually, yes, like you said, she starts a case against. So her mother and her village all work in a quarry that they've been in for years and years, and she found that actually in the law it looked like, because they had been living there, they actually may have rights to the land itself. So she was looking into that for her family. And she was really respected by the village, which was amazing and really interesting. I think that case is still possible, but I think that one of the things she found, which can become so complicated with all this, is that if they had the rights to the land, the quarry would possibly have to shut down, which means that they wouldn't have a job anymore. And the quarry has shut down. I don't know if it's because of the case, but the quarry actually has shut down, which has made a lot of that community actually just have to leave because they have to find other work. But I know that she's still active in that. I know Karthika really wants to be a human rights lawyer and work on things like this. And I think that these kids, too, have such a great potential to be this, go between these two worlds. As much as the two worlds were difficult to live in as they grew up, I think it's going to be such a benefit to them, as they become adults and can represent people in their own communities or communities like their communities and give a voice to them.
Yeah, it's such a great number of kids at the school who, it seems, want to give back to their community. You don't really see the kids, when you ask them what they want to be, like, I want to be a banker and make tons of money. They're like, no, I want to be a human rights lawyer and represent my community. Or one girl wanted to be a singer, but
yeah, and she's a great singer too, and she's a great artist. And I think I've been also so proud of, that's Prieta. Netflix made a short animation out of one of Prieta's poems that's in the series. That's so beautiful. It's called "I Am That Girl," and I just felt like. So she is an artist, she is a poet. She gets to sing in the series, and so I'm excited for her because she also knows that she has to support her family. Actually, like what you said, as a documentary film, like you go out and you think that you're like objective about things, and I realized when I went that I thought that these kids would feel like this is a burden on them to have to take care of so many people, and I wonder if that's a Western idea, because what I found was that they'd say, no, it's an opportunity. It's not like I think I kept trying to get them somehow to say, oh, this is really hard. I think it is hard, and as they grow older, they're seeing the realities that it's very challenging, and there's a lot to it. It's not easy. It's like Karthika said when she was young, she was going to build her mom a house with like 50 windows, she said, or something like that.
Barely get me to take a call from my mom on Sunday morning, right, let alone build a house for her.
So when she's young, she had that idea, and they all have this idea that they're going to be able to do it very easily. And then as they get older, just like all of us, realize like when you're in your 20s, you're not quite in the position to take care of yourself, let alone your whole village. And I think that that's true for them too. But they still have that, that hope and the drive to do it.
Vanessa, it's a beautiful series. Congratulations. 7 years in the making. All those years are worth it. It's wonderful. It's streaming now on Netflix.
Yeah.
Daughters of Destiny. Vanessa Roth, everybody. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you so much.